Hi, this is Kevin from the Bible Artist podcast, and today we're going to be talking about a theory that I have related to the House of David. This isn't one of our normal episode review and discussions. I'm just going to kind of build on an idea that I started to develop in our last discussion of episode 6. So if you did not catch that discussion, let me kind of give you a brief introduction to my crazy theory, which is that Ahinoam, who has been Saul's wife and gets banished at the end of episode 6. Sorry, spoilers if you have not seen it, but too late now. My theory is that Ahinoam of Saul will actually become Ahinoam of Jezreel that is married to David. So in the Bible, there are two Ahinoams mentioned. Saul has a wife named Ahinoam, but then later on it's mentioned that David gets married to a woman named Ahinoam of Jezreel while he is on the run from Saul in the wilderness. Now, I think it's most likely that the Bible is not meaning these two women to be the same, although there are some interpreters or people have theorized that they could potentially be the same person. And it was, as I was saying to Victor earlier, when we first discussed this, there are kind of certain lines in scripture that give this idea to people. For example, when Nathan confronts David after the whole Bathsheba incident, when David kills off Uriah, Nathan mentions how God gave so much to David. He gave him Saul's kingdom, and even it mentions his wives also being given to him. Now, that may be just kind of an expression, but some people have said, well, it could also mean that God literally provided Saul's wife Ahinoam to David, which this was kind of a practice in ancient Near Eastern kingship, that you would potentially take the wives or the harem of the king that you conquered or that you usurped from. And we see that actually happens with David himself when Absalom tries to take over David's kingship. He takes David's concubines and he sleeps with them publicly to kind of demonstrate that he's kind of taken his father's place. So the theory is that Ahinoam, at least in the show, the two Ahinoams might be the same person. Kind of a few different things go into this theory. So one is just kind of economy of characters. Shows tend to like to not multiply more and more characters. So if they can find a way to combine two characters into one character, that's very neat and tidy, because all the kind of associations and connection that we have to that one character, we don't have to build those to another character. We have to kind of attach ourselves to less characters. We have to learn about less characters. It's just easier on the viewers, helps us have a deeper emotional bond to a smaller number of people.
Have to pay two actors either.
Yes, also very practical. Less people to pay, less kind of scheduling, makes it a lot less complicated on their end as well. Another dimension of this on a more kind of thematic level, Ahinoam in the story of House of David has played this part with Saul of being kind of the almost devil on his shoulder. Like she's the pragmatist, the one who has kind of pushed Saul to be very hard-edged and willing to, she's the one who tells him to send David on this impossible quest in order to get him killed, so that Saul doesn't have to fear him. But she's the one who is kind of speaking to Saul's, like, the worst angels of his nature, trying to get him to do whatever he has to maintain control, maintain his power. And so one way that the show could use that is to have her actually play a similar role to David, because we know that David is going to face some of the same temptations as Saul, and he's going to also fall in some similar ways to Saul. So the show could kind of help us see the continuity between the temptations that Saul faced and the temptations that David faces by having a similar character play that role of kind of speaking to the worst aspects of who he is. So that would be kind of another dimension of it. We also know that the show is going to need to introduce polygamy. David has multiple wives, and by having Ahinoam, it's a female character that we are already familiar with, and she would kind of provide David with a different type of wife, because another kind of aspect of storytelling, especially on screen, is that you don't want to multiply a bunch of characters that look very similar and are very kind of similar demographics. So if David is going to have multiple wives, you don't want him to have just like multiple pretty young wives that are kind of difficult to distinguish from one another. So giving him one wife who is a bit older and who is very different from some of the other wives would help her stand out. It would help us to navigate kind of the differences between those characters. So those are just a few kind of storytelling reasons why all this may work out kind of practically. Did I miss anything there, Victor, in kind of the initial theory?
No, I think I love every part of that. I think you're really onto something on this one, just because even though biblically it's probably not going to play out that way, but like I say, on a show like this where you want to have the reason why I think it's actually going to happen is the kind of delicious drama you're going to get to where David can't have any love for Ahinoam
Mm-hmm.
on any level.
Yep.
She's caused so much problems for him, but for him to have to rely on her not
Mm.
just as an advisor, but to have her act as a wife would
Yep.
be it would just be so much drama and so many interesting kind of conflicts that they could have, and how it could play out, and how he's got to rely on her because she knows the ins and outs of court intrigue and how to navigate all of this, and she's going to have ideas that he's going to think are not remotely usable, but it's going to turn out that's how you do it, and she's going to be good at that. So I think that could be just a lot of fun to have to go through
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, and also, there's, like you said, lots of complicated character dynamics here. Ahinoam is the one who tried to get Saul to kill David, so it's also going to be, a big thing for her character to be willing to join with him, but she will be in a desperate way, having been banished from the house of Saul. So you can definitely see how she might be pushed into that whole situation. Obviously, Saul would go ballistic if he heard all this. Mychal would be so furious if she found out that her mother had married her husband, and that is also very yucky, which I know, like, that I think that has been the major stumbling block for most people who have responded to this, is that it feels so yucky. Like, I think it should feel yucky. Like, obviously this is not a great situation, and I don't think that the show, by putting these characters together, would be saying that it's good. Like, I think that the point would be to make it clear that the whole polygamy situation is yucky. So by involving this kind of almost incestuousness to David's harem, I think that the show would be helping to highlight the grossness of polygamy itself, which that's how the Bible tends to criticize polygamy. Not There are a couple of passages where it says that kings should not multiply their wives. There are a couple other things that the Bible does, but one of the main ways that it attacks polygamy is by just showing how yucky it can get through storytelling. By having two sisters who are competing with each other and for the affections of their husband, and are in a competition to have the most kids, and like that kind of thing. So I could totally see if the show did this, and had there be all kinds of drama as a result of this, that would be very kind of in keeping with how the Bible deals with the polygamy of certain important characters like David or Abraham or Jacob, and so on. Okay. Oh, go.
I was gonna say, what one reason why I would think maybe that they wouldn't do this, or that wouldn't be a good idea, is because it would kind of make it to where you could pin the blame on all the bad stuff that happens to David
Mhm.
later on her. Oh,
Yeah.
she's the common link between the fall
Mm.
of Saul and the fall of David. It's like, if not for this woman, this
Mm.
what is it? Son of a devious woman? Is
Oh,
that what?
Saul
Is that the phrase?
calls Jonathan son of a perverse
That's yeah,
woman.
yeah.
Yeah.
So she's already been kind of tagged as that.
Mm.
So I could see that being I mean, I don't think necessarily they wouldn't do that, but that would
Yeah.
be something that would make it to where it would just be piling on her being the reason why all these guys go bad,
Mm.
rather than
Well,
their own failure.
to be fair, like, I think the show has made her a very complex character, even though she is often, giving the advice that is kind of morally dubious and just pragmatic. The show at the same time has made her a very sympathetic character. We can see her motivations. We can see that often she is motivated by good things. She's just using bad means. So like, yeah, I don't know. I wouldn't be bothered by it because I think that what they would probably do with David, just like they did with Saul, is have, her giving some bad advice, but then, he would have other counselors as well that are giving good advice. And so he's still kind of in the seat, having to make the decision and having to choose between different advisors. And then the show is kind of dramatizing his decision making by kind of embodying his different potential sources of wisdom. Okay, so all that up to this point is still kind of going with my initial theory, theory 1.0. But as people were discussing this in the comments of the episode 6 video, a couple of viewers added on to this, and I really liked what they shared. So I thought that I would do this video just to put it out there and discuss it a little bit more. I think it was Marizda and Kingsley Awa. It's like 6877. Sorry if I
You
didn't
know
get
who you
the
are.
exact name. Yeah, you guys know who you are. So I think they both pointed out that in the biblical account, Ahinoam of Jezreel is said to be the mother of Amnon. Now, if you don't know much about the rest of the book of Samuel and all the stuff that happens in David's family, so after the whole Bathsheba incident, David, he has several kids. Amnon is the oldest kid, the son of Ahinoam of Jezreel. And David also has a daughter by a different wife. And Amnon has a lustful desire for this sister, half sister of his. And he eventually kind of tricks her. He pretends he's sick, kind of draws her into his chamber, and then he rapes her, which is, yeah, it's a horrible, terrible moment in the biblical story. But what someone pointed out is that it would be kind of yucky, but almost like fitting that David has this almost kind of incestuous relationship with Ahinoam, gives birth to Amnon, who then falls into incestuous relationship. I shouldn't say falls into, because that takes away his responsibility. Amnon, you know, incestuously rapes his sister Tamar. And so you would kind of create this sense of the sins of David kind of being visited on his children, which is kind of a biblical idea that, the sins of the fathers, if the sons do not repent of them, then they easily can kind of fall into the same sinful pathways that their fathers took on. So yeah, I'm curious what your thoughts are on that kind of additional wrinkle. Now, actually, before I ask your thoughts, obviously, Ahinoam, she is, obviously older than Mychal, and potentially, like, you would think that she might even be past normal kind of childbearing age. But this is also like a biblical show, so it could almost be kind of like a kind of perverse like Isaac situation where it's almost like a anti-miracle child, like that they were not expecting, that ends up being born to her in her old age, and the child is terrible in various different ways. Having given that caveat, yeah, Victor, I'm curious for your reaction.
I'm of the she's too old. The character. I
Yeah,
mean, you could. I mean, I'm looking at her. I mean, she's still seems like she could be childbearing age, but could be
yeah,
like say biblical, where you know anybody of any age can have a baby at some point. But it could also be to where she has like a handmaiden kind of
oh
thing, to
yeah,
where
yeah,
maybe they do that kind of thing.
yeah. So
So
it's not
that
like
way where
directly,
she has an heir, but it's
yeah,
through her
yeah,
servant or whatever. It could be something like that. But yeah, I mean, it feels like if she was 10 years younger, I think that would be
yeah,
you would be almost guaranteed that that's where
yeah,
they'd be going. And they probably still could go with that. I mean, you'd have to be pretty quick
yeah, yeah.
in what happens, but that's the kind of thing that TV shows like this do, and I think this show
Hmm.
could handle it. It would be very interesting for all the different things, but it would be kind of weird because that would be a no. I guess it wouldn't necessarily be a. They would be half. It would be a half brother to or sister, whatever the gender of the kid would
Mm.
be a half of Jonathan,
Mychal.
and
And
yeah, that's interesting. I mean, it's a
yeah, it would be troubling. Now, A few other objections, people are like, the House of Saul is kind of wiped out. So technically, her children with David would not be House of Saul
Right.
because she was just married to Saul, but then divorced from him. But also, Amnon gets murdered by Absalom, his brother. So he gets wiped out anyway. So regardless, it doesn't necessarily kind of create a problem there. Yeah, I'm not so in terms of like my like order of like certainty, both of these like this whole theory I think is it's not like high order of certainty. It's the kind of the first part, I would say it's starting to get up to like kind of mid-level, like I'd give it at least like 50-50 that they do it. And then the Amnon bit I would give even lower level, but yeah, I don't know. I just think it's like lots of kind of interesting possibilities out there. And so I wanted to throw it out there and see if anybody else wants to build on it. Maybe some people are going to yell at me and tell me that I'm crazy. This probably is crazy. If they do something else, like I'm not going to be disappointed or whatever. But if they do this, then I will say I told you so. Definitely.
I think it's
Um,
going to happen just simply because the actor has something to do.
yeah.
Otherwise, she's kind of going off of the page.
Yep.
You know, because there's not. But so this would give her something to do that is not just something to do. It's really juicy. She's a good
Yeah.
actress and is worthy of being on the show. So I could see them totally giving her this to do.
Yeah, I basically think that either they do like this route or they've written her off the show and like her chin up to Mirab was kind of her goodbye to the show. And I think that it's even possible that they don't know for sure, like sometimes with actresses, you have to see if they are interested in continuing on with a show like this. And maybe the writers are kind of exploring different angles and seeing if they like that direction. But I definitely think that they at least have the option to write her off if they wanted to leave her at this point. But if they keep her, she doesn't really have any other biblical jobs at this point. And so this would be give her something to do within the story. And like you said, it would create all kinds of drama. It would kind of serve different like thematic purposes. So I think it's at least a theory that's worth entertaining. Yeah, I'll be interested to see if they do it. So I just wanted to do that quick video to share that theory and kind of get it out there for those who didn't want to wait to the end of the episode 6 review. But that's it for now. And thanks for listening and leave your thoughts below. Godspeed.